Welcome to the Entrepreneur Stories podcast. Jonathan Herps is your host. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial founders, business owners, and CEOs. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi, it's Jonathan Herps again here. It's first interview of 2024. Welcome back, everybody. And welcome back to my podcast, Entrepreneur Stories of Scaling Up. This episode is the number 115. And today I've got great pleasure to be talking to Anthony Quinn, who's founder and CEO of RegTech Intelligence. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. And listen, why don't we just kick off? Can you tell us a bit about your entrepreneurial journey and your company?
Sure. So I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I started my career working in the consulting sector, first for Accenture in their capital markets practice, probably 25 years ago, consulting mostly to kind of investment and retail banks in the UK and in Europe and in a bit in the US. And I actually moved out to Australia probably 21 years ago and ended up running a bunch of risk and compliance programs for different organizations. So I spent a little bit of time at Westpac and the National Australia Bank, and then I spent 9 years at Macquarie Bank. I was the program director that ran the AML, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing program, as well as the tax evasion compliance program for the retail part of Macquarie Bank, which I did probably nearly for 9 years. And it was during that time, kind of in the last kind of project that I was working with Macquarie, that I kind of went to them and said, look, I want to start out my own company. They were kind enough to agree to allow me to work 4 days a week for them, and then 1 day a week kind of moonlighting, so to speak, sort of setting up RegTech. So I officially launched in November 2015. So RegTech Intelligence is essentially a regulatory technology firm that specializes in financial crime, risk and compliance software. And in particular, we focus on business-wide or enterprise-wide risk assessment solutions. So we have developed two platforms. So both of them are risk assessments. One of them is predominantly for small to medium-sized businesses called AML Accelerate, which is a guided risk assessment platform. It's been tailored to about 30 different industry sectors, and it's been tailored to about 30 different countries. So it's aligned to the AML laws. We've got clients in 18 countries so far. And the other risk assessment platform that we built is more kind of enterprise grade, targeting larger financial institutions and gaming firms, as well as consulting partners that we work with. And we have a number of risk domains that cover AML, but beyond AML. So we look at other financial crime risk disciplines like bribery and corruption, or fraud, or sanctions, proliferation financing, wildlife trafficking, human trafficking, and so on. But also non-financial crime domains. So we have a general enterprise risk management module as well as an ESG module. And so we typically work with larger firms that are looking to kind of configure the risk approach to their own kind of methodology and build their own risk models or leverage our content. And essentially for firms that are typically working on spreadsheets and looking at ways in which they can digitize away from those spreadsheets their business-wide risk assessment approach, and then move into kind of automation to be able to drive automatic risk assessment capabilities. So that's really what we're focusing on.
So you've got. Can you give me an idea of who would be your perfect client? It sounds like you've got two or at least a couple of segments in.
Anyone that wants to work with us is a perfect client. But I mean, typically where we find our sweet spot, either in the smaller markets where you might have companies that might be a fintech business or might be a smaller regulated entity. They could be a law firm, an accounting firm, real estate firm, any of those smaller industry sectors like high value goods dealers or what have you. And they typically kind of like lack the internal kind of skills and capability to be able to build a risk assessment methodology and a process and a framework and they might not have the resources to go and kind of hire consultants to help assist them through that process. So typically, organisations that come to us for that particular product are on the small to mid-size end, and that hasn't always been the case actually, which is why we set about building the risk assessment platform, because we thought that the larger, more sophisticated firms needed a lot more configurability over their risk assessment process. Like every methodology is different, every risk model is different, every organization is different, and so on. And so basically that's we deal with like large banks. We've got probably over 100 banks that we work for globally, credit unions, wealth and asset managers, and also in the gaming sector, we've got clients that are casinos and online gaming firms. So typically tend to be either smaller or larger. That's kind of what I enjoy about the business. We're still able to help a lot of organisations, regardless of whether they are, regardless of their size, because I think a lot of it boils down to less their size and more where they sit on the maturity spectrum towards digitizing and automating financial crime risk assessments.
That makes sense. Sorry about that, bang. I'm going to say
I didn't hear it.
We've just had another big storm just literally hitting us right now. So whereabouts are you?
I'm in Sydney in Australia.
Okay, batten down the hatches. It's about an hour and a half away.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so you've had a really interesting, it's an interesting background. So, corporates, consulting, corporates, entrepreneurship. If you had to start from scratch, are there any aspects of your personal leadership or leadership development that you prioritize more?
I think in terms of starting from scratch, I think people don't really have much of a clue about what they're getting in for when they sort of, a lot of, you're in the dreaming phase. When you think, oh, I'd like to go and work for myself. I'm sick of working in corporate land. I want to try and do something. And everything kind of really shifts from that point, because you go from being a salaried employee where everything is nice and comfortable and cozy, and you're used to getting a very good salary regularly, and there's very little risk. The risk profile that you've got as an employee is low. Like the worst that can happen is you get fired, made redundant, or need to go and find another job, and typically that is protected against anyway. Whereas you find yourself when you're starting out, your own business for the first time. In my own personal experience, while I was working at Macquarie, I was pretty much bootstrapping the business. So I probably put $700,000 of my own money into it. Then I quit Macquarie after building a kind of a prototype, and then didn't draw a salary for 2 years, nothing, and not a bean. And then I was on like a peppercorn salary for 2 or 3 years, and it's quite materially different. And so you might go from the scenario where you're paying out, earning 300 or 400 grand a year to paying out 300 or 400 grand a month in wages, and the risk profile of keeping everything kind of going is very different. So I think the lesson is really to actually have a deep think about what it is that you want to do, and because obviously there's different styles of business that you can get into that are probably less risky as well. So if you're in a consulting business, you really you're going out and selling your time, whereas what I chose to do was actually to found a technology business, and that requires a lot of upfront investment in terms of time and effort and money to build product, but then it requires kind of a lot more effort to continue to innovate, and things like that. So I think in some ways, in terms of like the personal reflections, it's more around, I guess, some of the things that can be your biggest strength, also your biggest weakness. I think if you just jump in and think, well, which is my attitude, like, this can't be that hard, let's give it a crack, have a go, Turns out it actually is hard. But by that stage, you're up to your neck in it, and it's like that's where the dogged determination kicks in. You're like, well, I've come too far now. Like we just got to like grind it out. So I think that you can't be too hard on yourself about that. But nobody really gives you a training manual around. Okay, you want to be an entrepreneur? Like here's where to start. And then you're basically learning everything for the first time. Like what should go in a shareholder agreement? How do you bring on employees when you don't have any money to pay them? How do you raise capital? How do you set up employee share option plans? How do you build a product team? How do you build business operation processes and sales and marketing and legal and finance and tax and R&D and everything else that goes into a business? It's pretty much you're learning, and because you learn, a lot of it is trial and error, and you make a lot of errors. You make a lot of dumb decisions along the way, and I've made more than my fair share of them.
Well, join the party. Yeah, no, well, maybe I could just, and look, I'm very similar to you. I came out of big business, big jobs in banking, went into property, thinking all my clients made millions out of property. Surely I can do the same, and back into big corporates, running a 3,000 person team, and as a CEO, and then my own consulting company. Like I've gone back to front in many ways, but it's fascinating. And you and I were just talking when we started. Yeah, we both decided to change operating systems. I decided to go with a Mac, and you decided to go from Mac to Microsoft. And when you're in business by yourself, like, how in the hell do I learn how to use this bloody thing? Like it's quite such a different.
Yeah, you take it for granted a bit when you think, oh, I've got a problem. Call up my IT team. Oh, wait, that's me.
Exactly.
In the early stage.
Exactly right. Yeah, I think that, if I could encapsulate the lesson, perhaps you and I both learned the hard way, is find the right mentors to help you, make less mistakes. But having said that, one of those things about success is you've got to be prepared to make mistakes.
Totally. I think in terms of like the mentoring, that's kind of interesting because the types of people that you need and want to surround yourself with can be completely different and can add value in certain ways, or actually destroy value in certain ways too, because unless you've actually walked in the shoes of an entrepreneur, people can offer advice, that's coming from the right place, but without the actual personal experience of seeding a business, bootstrapping a business, growing a business from scratch, it's completely different than being an entrepreneur or whatever they call it.
Yeah, no, look, I totally agree with you, and therefore it's got to be the right type of mentor. And the other thing is, really, it doesn't have to be a physical person. It's and as you say, look, we learned this the hard way, but there are a dozen books that are out there that I would recommend to any new entrepreneur that would fast track their experience unbelievably. But knowing where to go, and I call them my virtual mentors.
Have you read the Founder's Dilemma?
I have.
That I wish I had read 5 years before I did read it. I didn't read it prior to setting up the business, but that is probably the standout book for me that I would recommend people read, because it's got every decision that you can think of or you're faced with as a founder. Should you be a sole founder, which I am, or should you found with co-founders? Who are those co-founders? How do you actually find them? Build equitable kind of contributions and reward structures, and it just literally goes through every. Do you bootstrap it? Do you look for capital? Where do you look for capital? Who do you want as investors in your business? All those kind of things, right the way through to kind of exit and other kind of like disaster scenarios along the way. It's a really good book. That's probably the only one that I recommend anybody that's asking me. I'm thinking about starting out, man. What do you think? Read that and then let's have a chat.
Yeah. Hey, so tell me, you're an entrepreneur, you're a sole founder. Yeah, how do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
Honestly, really badly. There is no kind of personal life and business life. It is the lines are incredibly blurred, and regardless of how much you don't want them to be blurred. Like I said before, we've got clients now in 18 countries, and we're in RFPs in countries, and obviously Australia is not the friendliest place to live from a time zone perspective, albeit it's a beautiful country and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But often, I'm doing calls at 6 in the morning and doing calls at 10 at night. I've got two kids as well, so you just try and do your best to be able to balance your life around your work and your work around your life. But it's not easy, and the stakes are incredibly high. Like the big difference between being a kind of an employee versus an entrepreneur in terms of like the risk profile. You know, you have to succeed, because if you do not succeed, the consequences of not succeeding, not just for you, because you're the crazy one that started this kind of journey, but I think about our team, I think about their families, I think about my own family, and think about the sacrifices that I've made, that they've made, that their partners and their kids and whatever have made going on the journey with me, and that really kind of motivates you to keep going, and some cases that really, I guess, pushes the boundaries between what's normal and what's normal and what's not normal in terms of your life and your work. But it certainly opens up a lot of like challenges personally, and you really need kind of good understanding support network around you. Like you need understanding spouses or partners or family or whatever, because it's going to be an absolute roller coaster. Even 10 years in, for us, it's a roller coaster. We're doing well, we're grinding through, but I don't think you can ever sit there and go, yeah, we've made it, because like you're constantly innovating, trying to grow, juggling a million things, family, and it goes back, I think, to the mentoring point as well, is that you can't always talk to everybody that like if you've got issues with shareholders, or you've got issues with like capital, or issues with like there's some stuff that you have to, you can't really bounce off some people in and around the business, because of the worry or the impact that might have. So you got to kind of shoulder a lot of that, but then also find the people that can help and that have been there before and have actually walked in your shoes, because really there's a lot of people with a lot of advice and opinions, but unless you've really been in the trenches and been in the same position, it's kind of, I take that quite lightly from advice from corporates that have never run a business from scratch. It's just very different animals.
Totally agree. It's really interesting. I like you, running my own business. I decided to have a lifestyle business this time, right? Still have 9 staff. I have to worry about their families. And it never goes. But one of the things I spent a lot of time working with my founder CEO clients is how to get. I don't believe there's work-life balance for people like you and I, but how to get some form of balance, not only for you and the family, but also for you personally.
Yeah.
Getting time for you to get away. And like I read a blog some time ago, which was, I only have good ideas while I'm walking or when I'm in the shower. My good ideas come from when I do carve out some time away and get away either with a family or by myself, and sail or walk, and suddenly out of nowhere the really sharp special
Yeah.
strategies come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think that's like the noise around everything's kind of like going a million miles an hour. There's like lots of decisions you're making every single day, and just having the pause and reflection time, that's pretty important. So
Actually, I'm not sure where you're working today, but with one of my clients, we actually closed his office in the business, and so he goes into the business a couple of days a week. He goes into a boardroom, meeting room type environment, and he does the meetings and makes the decisions he needs to make there. And then we carve out time for him to work, from a separate office, just him, to actually work on the business, and we found it very effective.
That's pretty much what I do. Like, we had a big office pre-COVID, like a lot of people, and everyone was coming in, every day, all the time. And then, like most people, we kind of switched that to a mostly remote scenario. So I've got an office which is 2 minutes down the road from where I live, and then we've got an office in the city that we go to, typically meet up like one or two times a week. And because we've got those sessions where we know everybody's going to be together, we spend a fair bit of time kind of talking and workshopping and kind of thinking things through, collaboratively. I generally do think that, two heads are better than one, and 10 heads are better than five, whatever the analogy is. But I think, really, by getting people together in that kind of scenario, then it definitely kind of fosters that. But then I think after that kind of like retreating time where you're right, okay, right, I've got my job to do, I've got stuff that I need to get involved with, and being quite compartmentalized around the amount of time in a day you can give to a certain thing. You kind of have to be quite disciplined around what you do and what you don't do, and you don't always get it right, but you do your best.
How many employees do you have now?
We've got 15.
Right. So when you're looking to employ, what do you look for in employees, and how do you then build that? We've talked about the positive culture in the office a couple of days a week, but how do you build the positive culture?
I think in terms of how we employ, we've actually got kind of a mix. So we've got 15 full-time employees, but we employ more people that around the business that are kind of part-time, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. But I think first and foremost, the biggest criteria, obviously having some experience helps, but I think most of all, having the right attitude is really important. Like, it is a roller coaster. You're working at like a very fast pace. The expectations are pretty high from everybody around your own performance, as well as that in the team. So I think having people that really kind of understand the mission, understand the vision around what you're trying to achieve, long term, big picture, and then being really open and transparent about where you actually are. Like, we set ourselves some goals. Did we achieve them? No. Why not? What things are working well, what things are not working well. What do we need to do to improve across every area? And then often that's difficult because you've got aspirations bigger than your pockets, where you're like, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd like to hire someone else, and you come back to that, well, actually, we're going to need another couple of $1 million in cash to be able to achieve all those things. And it comes back to a kind of a reality bites often, where you kind of think, well, do we need to do that now? Could that wait? Is this immediate, or can this be something in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever? So I think it's just hiring for attitude and training, and then really it's around, like, there's some people that shouldn't work in startups, like, really, because if you've got a corporate mentality and a corporate way of thinking, and you work at a corporate pace where you try and set up a meeting sometimes with corporates, they're like, how about like next month, or maybe the month after, or like, it's almost like kick the can. Whereas I'm thinking, like, every week that goes by, that's 100 grand gone out the door. So it's like, right, let's get things moving, and that's like a constant source of kind of frustration where you got to play to the long term. But I think like I just try and be open and transparent. Like we do kind of a quarterly report, state of the nation around where we're at across kind of product and sales and pipeline and partnerships, and it's a pretty honest reflection. And we have what do we plan to achieve in the next 3 months? What do we achieve? With some commentary around it, and that is that's a good pause and reflection point as well. Like at the quarter end, where you're actually saying, well, actually, I did commit to doing that, and we kind of really didn't execute on that well. And so it's just a good keep yourself honest, basically.
Yep. Interesting. You're talking about quarterly sprints or quarterly planning, which is one of the things I work with all my clients on. So biggest learning since you've been a business owner, what do you reckon it would be?
Oh God, could be all day. Well, I think there is kind of no overnight success. I mean, there are obviously like a few things that just go off like a rocket, like ChatGPT or whatever. Taylor Swift. Just listen to a lot of Taylor Swift in the car with my daughter. So like there's people.
Well, I mean, even them, if you think about it, how long
they've been grinding.
How long did she try to be a singer?
Exactly. So I think people that have a short-term view and think, like, I'm going to jump out of a corporate, I've got to get a business going, and then within a year I'm going to flip that around and I'm going to live the easy life. Like that's kind of a fool's errand. I think the key thing is that a lot of it is around aspiration, but most of it is around perspiration. And I think without getting too corny, I think persistence beats resistance. You're going to have a lot of people that say no to you all the time. No, it's not right for us. The budget's not right. We're not there. Come back next year. We're happy to carry on doing stuff on spreadsheets. No. And it takes a certain dogged determination to be tenacious and just to keep going. And so I think there's ups and downs and great successes and some failures, and you just got to try and get more wins on the board, and just be dig in for the ride and dig in for the long term. And I think genuinely, if you're open with clients and partners and your own team around, well, here's what we can do, and you don't overpromise and underdeliver, and you kind of true to your word, and you're just real. You're not sort of faking it till you make it. You're literally just being genuine. I think people will appreciate that, and I think that's probably that's the reality. You're juggling a lot of balls, but I think that reflection is important around who you are, what you want to do, what you want to be when you grow up. It's some pretty. You got to do a bit of deep thinking around that. Do you want to be doing an entrepreneurial job in 10 years' time? Could you hack it in 10 years' time, given the pace or of change and of the life? You really got to ask yourself some pretty soul searching questions, I think, as you go through it.
Agreed. So what do you see as your biggest challenges now and going forward?
I think our biggest challenge is we've got aspirations that we can't yet fulfill. I think we're operating in 18 countries, but we don't have a physical presence in a lot of those countries. So we're obviously doing a lot of stuff, juggling a lot of things across time zones. We're probably under-resourced to do the things that we're taking on. So that is a challenge, but it's one that we relish, and also one that we've proven time and again that we can support. So we can but it requires a lot of effort, and that is a challenge in the long run. Like the you can't burn out. That's the challenge, and that's a balancing act. I think, like, I guess in the heyday when all the VCs and everyone was kind of throwing money out around like no tomorrow, that I found quite hard, because the expectations were quite alien to how I think and want to operate. Like, we want to basically build a successful business, and we make decisions that are kind of sound and solid. Whereas I think a lot of that kind of went out the window. It's like, well, here's $5 million, go and like hire 20 people, hire them within 3 months and 6 months, and then all of a sudden the revenues will come. And it's kind of, it doesn't really work like that in my experience. And I think now, seeing that the mindset changing around kind of investors that are looking for fiscally responsible CEOs that aren't, it's very easy to grow a business if you've got like $10-20 million to throw at people and throw at marketing and throw at product development, but it's a much more challenging scenario where you're actually where you're kind of like growing things and trying to get to a point where you're in control of your own destiny, and not like the puppet master. There's no puppet master behind the scenes pulling your strings.
Yeah, no, we've definitely seen the changes, and my clients have certainly seen the changes. I've had one in particular, actually, an ex Macquarie Bank person, who CEO founder, who actually moved his family to the US, because of fundraising. And it's just talking to him every fortnight. It's really interesting the way things have changed over the last 6 months from a venture capital perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So, to me, when you think of the word successful, which leader or entrepreneur resonates with you?
I don't know. I think they're all a bit crazy at some level. I think you have to be. I mean, even the word successful is a bit of a misnomer, because I guess in some guys, as you look at some entrepreneurs and you think, I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, what a genius that guy is. He's just literally, pushing the boundaries of humanity on so many levels. And then you think, oh, that guy's successful, is the richest guy in the world, or whatever. Like, look at the personal lives, like, 10 kids, like, I don't know, like, it's kind of like all about what drives you. And as kind of funny story, if you'll indulge me, I came home excited one day because a friend of mine was doing this CEO cookout where, the CEOs go and, cook meals for the homeless. And I came back to my wife and I said, I'd really like to do that. What do you think? She goes, isn't that for successful CEOs? I was like, thanks a lot, love.
It's interesting you say that. I put out a blog this morning, which was talking about how do you scale, and but it started with a personal story. Just before COVID, I came home and I was fried. I was done. And I was like, I was too much travel, away from the family. My wife sat down. She said, "Why don't you just take a week off and go and think about how you coach your clients and apply it to your own business?" It's like, duh.
Yeah, I think often, like, those closest to you have got some bloody sound advice, more than any mentor you could ever meet. And listening to them, and I wish I'd listened to my wife a lot more, because she's a lot eminently more intelligent and switched on in many aspects. So
I have one just like that. I have a 10-year-old daughter who most of the time I'm sure is much smarter than I am.
Yeah, mine too. She's 9, she's going on 19.
So you mentioned one book, Founder's Dilemma. Any other books or podcasts you'd recommend?
I mean, to be honest with you, most of the books that I read aren't really sort of business related books. I mostly read around crime, financial crime. I love that topic. I read it. Pretty much read most of the books that come out in and around that space. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of books in that arena that have been fantastic, and really fascinating for people that are involved in the sort of financial crime kind of compliance community to really kind of think about the why. That is really the why, like, the personal suffering that happens because of the result of financial crime, understanding those kind of stories, and some of them are pretty horrific. That's really what sort of spurs me on. So they're the main sort of books that I read.
That makes sense. And also in some ways takes your mind off the day to day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Last question. Any last piece of advice or parting words for aspiring entrepreneurs out there or entrepreneurs of growing companies?
I think, I mean, it's a bit about what I was saying before. It's really around, perseverance, and being able to dust yourself off and, carry on going, like that persistence beats resistance. You need to be persistent at what you're doing because you're going to face a lot of resistance. And I think, those that are, resilient, those that kind of get back up, those that learn and listen, like if we lose a deal or we lose a customer or we really want to know what happened. Was it us? Was it them? Was it, is it out of our control? Could we have done something better or different? Or, it's really genuinely learning and listening, and then acting, like actually, and applying that, and then not being too hard on yourself if things don't go to plan. Like there's no kind of hockey sticks in this kind of game. It's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and I think it's just being, persistent enough to get everything kind of bedded in. That's probably the parting words that I would give for anyone. So,
okay, great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time, Jonathan. I really appreciate that.
Oh, look, I mean, I said this a lot on the podcast. This has become one of those things that in my business that is like it's one of the things I really enjoy, and I only do this bit of it. Everything else is done, all the arranging is done by others. But it's the conversations are phenomenal.
I appreciate the opportunity because there's only a few people that actually want to hear most of the people around me. Like I'm sick of talking about it. So I think just be able to like vent and wax lyrical and share. If there's one person that gets one bit of advice that they find helpful, that's a result.
Oh, that's right. And like in all of these, your number 115, there are there's been some gems in this conversation as there always are. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. Cheers.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in entrepreneur stories of scaling up. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.